Hi, welcome back to Joe Blogs. In this episode, I want to talk to you about the 6 things that you're doing that are stopping you from getting rich. And these are things that are totally in your control. You can change the way you're living, the way you're going about your everyday life to make sure that your net worth and your wealth is increasing. So let's get started. And don't forget, I always put chapters in my videos. So if one of these things doesn't apply to your lifestyle at the moment, you can skip over it. But I can tell you that the 6th item today absolutely applies to everybody and is the number 1 tip for helping you to get rich. There are many reasons why people take on debt. But the most common one is because you don't have enough money to actually buy what it is that you're wanting to buy. So it might be a car, or it could be a holiday, or it might be a property. But the problem with debt is that it's expensive. It costs you money. You have to pay interest over and above the amount that you've borrowed. And we all know that the banks and financial institutions are some of the wealthiest companies in the world, and they're making money from giving you that debt. And the reason that they're so wealthy, why they're making so much cash, is because it's a money spinner. And if you're on the opposite side of the equation, if you've got debt, if you've borrowed money, that's stopping you from getting rich, because you could be putting that money that you're paying them as interest to one side and then doing something with it. But unfortunately, you're having to pay it back. And the longer that the debt sits there, the more it's going to cost you. And so you need to have a look at what debt you've got. If you've got any right now, have a look and see what you're paying. You should know to the dollar exactly how much that debt is costing you every single year. It drives me insane when I talk to people who've got debt and they don't know the terms that they're paying. So somebody might have credit card debt and you'll say, okay, how much are you paying for that credit card debt? And they'll say, I don't know, maybe $100 a month, $200 a month. Haven't really checked it out. I don't really want to face it. And that is a major problem, because credit cards are some of the worst possible debt that you can have. You are likely to be paying in excess of 20% per annum on that debt. And this is compounding in a lot of situations, because if you're not paying off your credit card every single month, then it's adding to the balance, and therefore you're paying interest on top, and they're adding the interest on top, and becomes an absolute nightmare. But it doesn't matter what type of debt you've got. Debt will stop you getting rich, because you're giving money away to whoever's giving you that cash. So have a think about your life. Think about whether or not you really need to make that purchase that you're thinking about borrowing to do. If you don't, then avoid it, because being debt-free is one of the first steps on the road to getting rich. Many people see having a car as an absolute necessity. You might need it to get to your place of work, or to go to visit people, or just go to the shops, or whatever it might be. You need a car. But what car you buy and how much you're spending on it every single year is totally in your control. Now, for a lot of people, a car is a status symbol. They want to show people how well they're doing in their life. So they might buy a very expensive, large car just to prove that they're doing really well. But you never actually know how well somebody's doing, because you don't know how they financed that car, because you can do it in a number of different ways. You might just take a loan from a financial institution, or you might get a lease deal or some other sort of arrangement, and all of those deals cost an absolute fortune. So if you're sitting with one of those sort of arrangements, you shouldn't be doing that. If you can buy a car outright, then that is the best possible option, because you're not then paying all of those debt charges over and above what you've paid for the car. But even if you have bought a car outright, a car is still an absolute wealth killer, because the vast majority of cars depreciate at a rapid value. And if you've bought a new car, if you decide that you want to go to the dealership and drive away in a brand new car with 0 miles on the clock, then you are insane if you're looking to build your wealth, because new cars depreciate at the fastest possible rate. They can decline by between 20 and 40% in the first year. So if you spend $100,000 on a brand new car, that car could be worth as little as $60,000 in 1 year's time. So you've lost $40,000 just to show people how great you're doing in terms of the car that you're driving. And over the course of the first 3 years of a car's life, it can lose around 60% of its value. So the smart thing to do is not to buy a new car if you need to buy a car. The best idea would be to look at something that's maybe 3 to 5 years old, because they're still new enough that they've got plenty of life left in them. They'll still be fun to drive. They'll still look good, but you're not losing that huge amount of money that you will on new vehicles. But one of the biggest questions that you need to ask yourself is, do you really need a car? And many people do need cars. If you live in the middle of nowhere and you don't have any public transportation, then clearly you might need a car. But do you need to buy the car that you've got? Could you downsize next time you buy a car? Could you get something that's a little bit older, maybe not quite as expensive? Because when you look at the running costs of a car, they are draining your wealth. So in addition to the depreciation that we've just talked about, you've also got to pay insurance. And the bigger the car and the more expensive and the more new the car is, the more the insurance will cost you. So that's an annual cost that you're paying every single month. You've also got to look at what fuel you're putting into that car. So generally a bigger car with a bigger engine will use more fuel. So that's going to cost you every single month as well. You then have to maintain and repair that car. Now, if you buy a new car, you might be thinking, well, I don't need to pay anything because I've got a service plan. I get a free service every single year. But I can tell you that the cost of that service is actually built in to the price that you paid to the dealership when you bought that brand new car. So you might be thinking that it's free, but it isn't. You've just paid for it in advance in a different way. So there are lots of different costs associated with owning a car, and all of these costs build up. They are draining the amount of money that you have on a monthly basis, and you could be putting that money to one side and doing something to increase your wealth. And the other question here is, do you really need that vehicle? Could you get by just for a month, just as an experiment, by just using Uber? Or maybe join a car club or Zip Cars or something like that. Something whereby you can use a car on an occasional basis. Do you need to have a car sitting outside of your house every single day, depreciating in value, costing you money in insurance, costing you money to keep the fuel in that car? Do you need to have that every single day? Or could you get by just by paying somebody else to drive you around? If you sit down and work out the numbers, you might actually find out that it would cost you a lot less to get by Uber. Unless you're a naturist and you live in a nudist colony 365 days a year, you need to buy clothes. So I'm not saying that buying clothes is a waste of money. We all do need to do it. But you have a choice in terms of how much you're spending on clothes every single year. And I know a lot of people who only wear the best designer clothes. They will wear Gucci and Prada and basically spend tens of thousands of dollars every single year on the latest designer gear. But the problem with that is it's costing you a fortune. It's draining all of your capital. Now, it might be that that's part of your persona. It's a little bit like the car that we just talked about. People want to be seen to be doing well. They're wearing designer clothes and people say, wow, have you seen how much that jacket is? Do you know how much those shirts cost? How much that dress is? And it's thousands and thousands of dollars. But the problem with that is that unless you can afford it, unless you've got millions of dollars in the bank already, that is draining your funds. And the worst thing you could possibly do is to combine buying designer clothes with credit cards, as we just discussed. If you're building up debt just to be seen to be looking good, but actually you can't really afford it, then that is an absolute no-no. But if you do want to wear designer clothes, if it is something that you like to do, if it's part of your brand, you can buy them second hand. You can go onto places like Vinted and eBay and pick up designer labels at a much better price. It's a little bit like buying a second hand car. You don't lose that initial depreciation on the goods. So you can still do it, but you can do it on a budget. But for most of us, if you don't need to be wearing Gucci and Prada, if you can live with wearing something like Hollister or a down market brand, then if you can do that over a prolonged period of time, you will save thousands and thousands of dollars. And you can then put that to one side, invest it, and this is how you will get rich. The vast majority of us like technology, and there's nothing like getting a brand new piece of tech. The excitement when you get that box and you unwrap it and you take it out and it's brand new. Nobody has touched that item ever before. But if you're addicted to tech, if you're constantly buying the latest, greatest technology, if you're a slave to Apple and you're getting the latest Apple iPhone, the latest Apple Watch, the latest iPad, the latest MacBook, then you are an idiot because you're spending far too much on all of that tech. Because Tech does improve. Every single version of the iPhone gets better, but it's only marginal. So unless you've got something from about 10 years ago that doesn't really do any of the functions today, the new iPhone is unlikely to be that much better than your current iPhone. If it's broken, then obviously you might need to upgrade it. But do you need to keep buying all of the latest technology? Because this is absolutely draining your wealth. And you may see it as a status symbol. You might like to be seen out and about with your very latest technology, sporting your Apple Watch and your latest phone and your latest iPad and maybe your Google glasses and all of those sort of things. But the problem with technology is that it depreciates in value, and over time it will become worth less. Now, you can sell these things on eBay, and I would definitely recommend anybody that's got old technology digging it out and sticking it on eBay, because you will be surprised at how much you can get back for things that you believe are completely worthless. But the problem with buying new technology all the time is that it's constantly drawing down on your funds. And these things are expensive, and you could be much better served using that money as an investment to get rich in the long term. Now, this is quite a controversial one, but don't skip just yet. If you're somebody that likes alcohol, if you like to go out and about, have a few drinks, go to the bar, have a nice glass of wine with your meal, maybe buy some nice wine to have at home, invite people over for drinks, then you're probably spending more than you should on those nights out and those drinks. Now, speaking as somebody who did used to like alcohol a lot, in my 20s and 30s, I was always out and about. I used to go out every Friday and Saturday night to bars and clubs and all of that exciting sort of stuff. And I can tell you that I didn't keep track of how much I was spending on those nights out. So during the week, I was really analytical with my spending. I'd work out what my daily budget was, how much I was going to spend on lunch, what I was going to spend on my shopping, all of those sort of things. But as soon as I hit the bar on a Friday night, all of that was out of the window. I would just spend as much as I liked. I would go out, and if we went on late somewhere else, I'd just keep spending. And because I was able to put it onto my cards, you didn't even need to have the cash in your pocket, which would have told me it was time to go home. If I had $100 to spend and I'd spent that $100, then I knew it was time to go home. But the problem was that didn't happen because I had plastic. And so the only way that I knew how much I'd spent was by looking at all of the receipts the next day, and even that didn't tell me because sometimes I didn't have any receipts. I'd have to wait until my credit card bill came, and then I could check out how much I spent. And generally speaking, I didn't really want to look at that bill, so I'd just ignore it. And the problem when you go out for drinks is that everybody becomes overly generous. If you've had a couple of glasses of beer, a couple of glasses of wine, and somebody says, shall we do this? Shall we go for a meal? Shall we get some shots? Shall we go to a club that maybe costs $20 or $30 to get in, and it's $15 to $20 per drink? You think, yeah, why not? It's Friday night, it's Saturday night, you only live once. But the problem with doing that on a regular basis is that you're spending hundreds and thousands of dollars per month on those nights out. And that really isn't good for your financial wealth. And the problem with alcohol, it's a little bit like the designer clothes and the designer cars, is that people want to be seen to be doing really well. So you'll go to an expensive bar, you'll go to an expensive restaurant, you'll spend maybe $400 or $500 on a bottle of wine because you're in a group and you want to be seen to be doing well. And all of that is absolutely crazy because alcohol is something that, people enjoy. They have a few drinks, but you don't need to be spending thousands of dollars on it. You can do it in a different way. If you like alcohol, if you like going out, having a few drinks to relax or whatever it might be, you don't need to be spending an absolute fortune doing it on a regular basis. And if you can cut back on the spend that you're making on alcohol, then that will leave you with more free cash, and you can then invest it to become rich in the long term. Okay, so here we are at the last tip, and this is the big one. This is the single thing that is stopping you from getting rich. And the issue is that you're not investing. So basically, all of the money that I've been talking about in this video, all of that cash that you could be saving, if you can eradicate your debt, if you can buy a cheaper car, if you can avoid spending a fortune on designer clothes, if you can avoid buying the latest tech, and if you can cut back on the amount you're spending on alcohol, then all of that will free up some cash for you. But what do you do with cash? And I've heard the phrase cash is king a lot. That's what a lot of people say. Cash is king. You need to stay on the cash. But as Warren Buffett said, Cash isn't king if it just sits around doing nothing. You need to do something with that cash to make sure that it's working for you and helping you get rich. And the thing that you need to do with that cash is invest it. And I'm talking about making real investments over the long term. So you could put the money in the bank and you might get paid a small amount of interest on that money, but that isn't going to get you rich in the long term. Investing it into the stock markets will get you rich. When you look at the long-term returns, they will deliver for you. This chart shows the growth of the S&P 500 over the past 32 years. And the S&P 500 are basically the 500 largest companies in America, which is the largest economy in the world. So basically what you're investing into here are the biggest companies in the biggest economy. So that is the safest bet that you can go for. And what this chart shows is that over the past 32 years, the compound annual growth rate of the S&P 500 was 10.98%. So that means that on average, it increased in value by almost 11% every single year. Now you might be thinking, 11%, that's not going to get me rich. But I can tell you that if you invest $400 per month over the next 30 years, and it grows at a compound rate of 11%. That $400 investment will be worth over $1.1 million in 30 years' time. And as you can see from this chart, the vast majority of that increase in value is through the compounding growth of the markets. The green section shows how much the wealth has grown by. The blue section is just the principal amount that you've put in on a monthly basis. So the overall summary of today's video is that if you can cut back on what you're spending on, if you can save $5 here, $10 there, and maybe get to $400 per month, which is not a huge amount. I'm sure a lot of us could potentially save somewhere between $100 and $400 per month. But rather than putting that money into the bank and just earning a small amount of interest on it, if you invest it into the markets, in the long term, the markets will go up. They might come down in the short term, but keep investing on a regular basis because that then averages out the cost that you're putting into the market. So when the market does go down, that actually represents an opportunity for you because you're able to buy more units because the price has come down. But if you put $400 into the markets over the next 30 years, there is a very good chance that that could grow to be worth more than $1 million over the next 30 years. Now, you might not have 30 years. You might be sitting there, you might be 70 or 80 years of age. And if you are, then hopefully you're enjoying life and you've got enough money. But even if you are, the principle is still the same. If you invest money on a regular basis, it will go up. And if you can save money to invest, it becomes more exciting. Rather than just spending money on debt or designer clothes or tech, it is far more interesting to save that money, put it into the markets, and then you can watch it on a daily basis. When the markets go up, you feel happy. If the markets come down, then obviously that will reduce the value of your current investment, but it gives you an opportunity to potentially go further into the market, buy up some units whilst they're cheap, and benefit when the market comes back. So the overall summary of today's video is that if you can control your spending, if you can cut back on the unnecessary items that you're currently spending on and use that money as an investment, it will help you get rich in the long term.